building peace through the arts. And one of the things that the Lansing Regional Sister Cities Commission wants our community to understand is that we're in a world that needs the arts in order to make us a peaceful place. And we have invited guests here to this forum, which is a conversation on peace and a conversation on the arts. And we want people to understand the connectivity through different organizations and different faiths, different religions, different cultures. And we have a youth summit that we think is very important because we're trying to teach children the importance of leadership in the areas of peace. Because we know that if you use music and the arts, whether they're the physical arts and musical arts, that helps people to understand how to listen to each other and how to talk together and how to understand each other. We have two tremendous guests who are with us. One of them is Alvin Waddles, who is a musician, conductor, soloist, composer from the Detroit area. And he has worked in various communities. He's worked with Aretha Franklin, and he's been the producer and the pianist of Dreamgirls and so many international and national musicals. And then we also have Maestro Karim Wasfi. Maestro Wasfi is originally from Egypt. He was born in Egypt, and he has lived in Iraq. And the important thing about him is that he started a Peace Through the Arts Foundation because he understands the emphasis that music can have on peace.
I think we'd have a genuine, authentic approach towards connectivity and interdependence. We are sharing positive energy, we're sharing good stories, we're sharing, identifying matters that are of very innate need to be prioritized. We're hoping also to promote our concepts of peace through arts and peace through music. I believe that peace is profitable. We believe that through connectivity, through resonance, through a higher level of consciousness and awareness and networking, we can overcome the impact of instability and radicalization. We aim to de-radicalize, prevent terror and tension, and create a refined, helping each other to create a roadmap towards a future that everybody deserves, and to rise above disagreement. We have seen trouble for centuries. This is not new. We have seen radicalization and terror for many, many, many centuries. What is different is that the impact you can have through communication, the impact you can have through media also, to promote messages of refinement and stability, but most importantly, the need to not to be constrained in silos, the need for all of us to coalesce and to rise above the problems, the impending doom of uncertainty through civilization. We do not need to impose or to enforce any ideologies or concepts of how people should live, but we help everyone to make a better choice.
First of all, let me just say thank you to all of you who are here. We appreciate so much that you have an interest in the topic that is so of importance, so much of importance to the Lansing Regional Sister Cities Commission and to the city of Lansing. And actually, I should say to Michigan State University too, because they've been so kind in helping to sponsor this event. The Office of Outreach and Engagement through Mr. Professor Hy Fitzgerald is underwriting the cost of this event for us, and we, of course, appreciate that. The Sister Cities Commission is very much concerned about some of the violence that's going on in the world today, and the fact that many of our children, our students in schools, have no idea what's happening in Syria or Korea or many of the other areas. So the first part of our program was to have a youth summit, a youth leadership summit. And the purpose of the Youth Leadership Summit is it's designed to engage our young people in understanding the issues that are happening around the world, not just on the street on which they live or the city in which they live, but all around the world. And they met this morning. until noon, and they will also be meeting tomorrow from 9 until 2 o'clock. And their purpose is to take this topic, study the topic, engage in the topic, and work in groups to come out with some consensus on how they can problem solve areas around violence and peace. And we believe, even though we're talking mainly about world peace, we're also talking about peace in the classroom. Because if you can use the arts to help to enhance peace in the world, certainly you can take a look at the arts, and whether it's visual arts, media, or music, to reduce violence, to reduce suicide, bullying, and so many of those other areas that are of such concern to all of us. So we're so pleased that you're here. Now, we really want you to engage in the conversation after our panel concludes their remarks. And if you have any burning questions during that time, you could also raise your hand and ask a question during their presentations as well. But we really want this to be one of many conversations that will take place in the city of Lansing. We need to talk to each other. We need to get to know each other. And that's why this is a group of interfaith individuals, intercultural individuals, and people who really have burning desires. Can't you see that they have burning desires up here? To tell us what's going on in their hearts and their minds. I'm going to ask first for the Sister City Commission members who are here just to raise your hand so people will know that you are here. We certainly appreciate all the work and the concern that our commission members put together. And I'm going to right now thank Martha Vegeta, who's with the mayor's office and who's back at the table there, whom I don't know what I would do without Martha. She's always assisting and helping us. And I guess I'll also say thank you to my pastor, who is here from Trinity AME Church. People don't thank pastors very much, but I'll thank her because 2 days in a row she's showing up to see if I'm going to pass this test. So we're Pastor Lila Martin, Trinity AME Church. We're so glad that you and other members of our church are here today. We're going to start with David Weiner. Many of you know Dave Weiner, who was at one time assistant to Mayor Hollister. Taught Mayor Hollister everything he knows, didn't you, Dave? He's a teacher of American Studies at MSU for 8 years, legislative aide in the Michigan House of Representatives for 20 years, executive assistant to the mayor of Lansing for 12 years, and he's currently president of the congregation Israel, did I pronounce that correctly? Thank you, a Jewish Reconstructionist community. And he's also currently treasurer and board member of the Southside Community Coalition, which is a neighborhood center in Southwest Lansing. And he's married with 2 daughters and 2 grandchildren, and has done a phenomenal job in our community. So David, if you will come and begin first. Peace through the arts, our topic for today.
Thank you, Barbara. Can you hear me okay? So I'm not entirely sure why I'm here on the panel, except that Barbara and Maxine and I are old friends, and we've traveled to Japan together and China together and Africa together, and we brought our peaceful demeanor to all those places. And when she called me, actually it was Maxine who called me, I was in New Zealand visiting my daughter, whose husband has a fellowship in New Zealand, and they're there for the better part of the year. New Zealand is a very peaceful country, one of the first countries to take a position against nuclear armaments and supporting environmental, is concerned about the environment, obviously. They have a problem because the hole in the ozone centers over New Zealand, and so they're very concerned about the environment, more so than most other places in the world. So I was there, and I get this call. I forget what time it was because the time is confusing there. It's 18 hours difference. They're tomorrow there. And she talked about peace, and I was feeling very peaceful. So I accepted. So then, when I realized who was on the panel and who was here, I thought, well, I really want to be here to honor Maestro Wasfi, and I want to honor Maestro Waddles, who I've heard perform before at a number of Barbara's functions. So anyhow, here I am. So I want to talk about four things. I want to talk about a art gallery in Israel that I visited 3 years ago in the town of El Fahum. It's the Palestinian village outside of Haifa. I want to talk about that. I want to mention, although I don't know a great deal about it, perhaps Maestro Wasfi knows more about it than I do, the West Eastern Divan Orchestra, yes, and maybe he can speak to it even more than I can, which is an orchestra created by Daniel Birnbaum, who has brought together Israeli and Arab musicians from throughout the Middle East. And I'll read one of the quotes from him about his purpose. I want to talk about our synagogue's work this last year in working with refugees in this community. And I want to then finally conclude by talking a little bit about a new organization that I've become involved with called the Network of Spiritual Progressives. And I want to read from their vision statement and talk a little bit about their concept of a global Marshall Plan, just to kind of give us a vision of what some of the possibilities might be. Barbara said I should talk for 10 minutes or so, hoping that Professor Khalil will get here.
Well, I said 10 because I know you could take 30.
I probably have just taken 30 just to introduce what I'm going to talk about. Okay, so I'll jump in. So El Fahum. El Fahum is an Arab village, a large village of about 50,000 people just southwest of Haifa. We were there to visit an art gallery that has been established by a former juvenile justice worker, a Palestinian juvenile justice worker who was concerned about how to work with young people and to get them involved in the community. And he started to do that through art and bring artists to them to help them look for ways to express themselves. And that then led to the idea of bringing together both Israeli and Arab artists, not only to teach each other and to teach the young people in the village, but to display their art. It's become now one of the finest galleries in the country, and people come from all over. They have art not only from Israeli artists and Palestinian artists, but artists from throughout the Middle East and from Europe. So if you go there, you'd think you were in a fine gallery any place in the world. Here's the goals. I want to read the goals that he writes. He says the goals are to present contemporary and high-quality art. The goals are to develop and enhance the awareness of art in all age groups, to serve as a cultural and artistic center for artists of our region, as well as for other Arab and Jewish artists in Israel, to encourage cultural dialogue between Arab and Jewish artists on a variety of themes, including ones related to current affairs, to create a multicultural dialogue between artists from Israel and abroad, and to build this museum of contemporary art. We are very moved to be there and to see the work that was going on and to see the display of the artists, of the students who from El Fahum who were studying under Israeli artists and vice versa. So I give this as a case study of one very positive thing where people in a region where there's tremendous conflict and where we hear a lot about bitterness and fighting and death, here's an example of artists who are reaching out across the divide in order to try to bring people together and find a common humanity by creating things that are beautiful, that they can appreciate and share together. So now to the Western Eastern Divan Orchestra. There was a piece on 60 Minutes recently about this with extensive interviews with Daniel Birnbaum, and also with some of the musicians I recommended to you. You can go to who does 60 Minutes, CBS. Anyhow, go online and you can find it and you can see it. It's about a 10-minute piece and it's a very beautiful piece. The artists talk about, Birnbaum says, it's not my purpose to create peace by putting this orchestra together. It's my purpose to make beautiful music by bringing people together. But then the artists are interviewed, mostly young musicians, 20s, 30s, who say, I've never met anybody, the Israeli said, I've never met any Arab people. The Arab said, I've never met any Israeli people. I have this vision of them as demons, as horrible people. But now I find that we have this music that we share together. And in sharing the music together and in playing together, they get beyond, they're musicians, they're artists, they're concerned about making beautiful music together. And in so doing, they find a commonality. They talk politics outside the music, and they don't always agree, but they've been able to listen to the other person. They've been able to get beyond the other in order to be through their music. So again, this is a wonderful case in point of how people can come together through the arts to break through anger, hostility, conflict, in order to begin to create peace on a small scale, but that's sometimes where peace has to begin. So let me read the comment from Birnbaum about the orchestra. He says, the Divan, that's the name of the orchestra, is not a love story, and it is not a peace story. It has very flatteringly been described as a project for peace. It isn't. It's not going to bring peace, whether you play well or not so well. The Divan was conceived as a project against ignorance, a project against the fact that it is absolutely essential for people to get to know the other, to understand what the other thinks and feels, without necessarily agreeing with it. I'm not trying to convert the Arab members of the Divan to the Israeli point of view, and I'm not trying to convince the Israelis to the Arab point of view, but I want to create a platform where the two sides can disagree and not resort to knives, to resort to beautiful music. So here's another example of where people in their own work, in their own area of art, are bringing people together in order to break down the barriers, to get to know each other. I particularly appreciate his comment about this is a project against ignorance, because so much of violence and so much of hostility is created through ignorance, not knowing the other, not listening to the other, not caring about the other. And I'm going to conclude with that when I get to the network of spiritual progressives. So now, our synagogue each year selects a theme to overview both the education that our children are getting in our school, to kind of give a context for much of our prayers, and to be a basis for adult education. So this year, in large part because we were making our decision at the time when Trump was just ending DACA, was closing off the borders to Muslim people coming into the country, as Jews in particular, who were kept out of all countries during the Holocaust, and who millions of us perished during that period because people wouldn't let us in, we were especially sensitive to this issue. So we felt it was a natural thing to select this issue to talk about during the year. So what we've done, and again, it's been modest, but it's again getting people to know each other. We've worked with the Ingham Regional Resource Collaborative, Ingham Refugee Resource Collaborative, And Sergei Kek knows a lot more about it than I do, so if we get into a conversation, he can speak to it and the work he's done with that collaborative. It brings together about 30 different organizations around the community who work together, who work with refugees, and who try to coordinate their resources in order to help each other. So what we did was we were able with them to set up a interaction between our students and the young students from several different refugee communities, particularly the Burmese community and the Vietnamese community. So we had several sessions together, which were facilitated by the Resource Collaborative. We had a learning circle where we had some of the parents of the children who were getting to know each other meet together and have a meal together and tell each other their stories. And then we had a final community event where we did some art together and where we talked about where we came from. We talked about where we came from, the various places in the world that that we came from, and our guests and our friends talked about where they came from. So it became a beautiful effort to bring us together and to become sensitive to each other, and for the children to begin to get to know each other. I see Professor Khalil is here, so welcome. So I'm going to try to wrap this up. I don't know how long I've been talking, but probably long enough. So now I want to finish. So just the final word about this effort. It's been such a successful thing. It's been so heartwarming for us to connect with people who are refugees. We've recovered and remembered our own history, and we've dug into our own past and our own memories and our own feelings, and really felt a connection with contemporary refugees. So we're going to continue this effort. This is not just a one-year project. This is something that we feel is critical to go on. It's not specifically art, but it has the soul of art. Finally, the Network of Spiritual Progressives. This is a national movement begun by Rabbi Michael Lerner back in the 80s, who realized that what was happening in American politics was that people were not listening to each other. The elites were looking down on other people and saying, you're racist, or you're bad people, you don't have the right values, and vice versa. The other people were looking at elites and saying, you don't care about anybody but yourselves, you believe that you have all the answers, and so on. And this movement, which has been going on now for a long time, this process which has been going on for a long time, really culminated, I think, in the election of Trump, who really has capitalized on, so to speak, on the divisiveness in our society. So Lerner and others said, now, if not before, now is especially the time when we need to try to break through these impasses, these sense of I'm right, you're wrong, I know the answers, you don't. And the creation of the sense of the other, the person who is the other person who we're going to disregard. So we really need to find a way of listening to each other. So the Network of Spiritual Progressives is designed to build a new bottom line, what is called a new bottom line, and I'll read it to you. A new bottom line where institutions, corporations, social practices, government policies, education, our legal system, and our medical system are judged efficient, rational, and productive to the extent that they maximize love, caring, kindness, generosity, justice, peace, ethical and ecological sensitive behavior, and to the extent that this enhances both our capacity to respond to others as embodiments of the sacred and our capacity to respond to the universe with awe, wonder, and a radical amazement at the grandeur and mystery of all being. This is a very vast spiritual concept. So we try to embrace this, and based on this new bottom line, we are being trained to in empathetic listening, not just to other people, but to ourselves. When I am interacting with someone who I don't agree with, how do I center myself so that I know what I'm feeling, but don't let my disagreement with that person get in the way for my recognition of that person as a human being, and my interest and care and love for that person as someone who I want to get to know and who I am not dismissing as wrong or bad. How do we break down the barriers so that we begin to create a caring, loving, respectful interaction and civil community? So there's a lot more to say about that, but I think my time is up. So those are some of the things that I offer you as a way to seek peace both in our own community and elsewhere in the world.
I thank David very much for being able to be here today. When we were trying to think of who we might want to have on our panel, the name that kept coming out was David Weiner from all segments, because people have watched him over the years, and he had to be involved in listening as a part of the legislative process when he was with the city, and now working in the community groups that he's working with, and of course the synagogue as well. But he's also been working with refugees, and when we get to our real conversation, he mentioned Sergio Keck, who's with the Lansing School District. I think some of us don't realize, because we live in our own communities, that we have other communities that are new to this area. And Sergio with the Lansing School District works with the refugee population. When we started, for example, the Black Child and Family Institute, and when I was on the State Board of Education, and when I joined the Sister Cities Commission, we used to talk about conversations and how to keep gangs separate, because we would put, the school district would put gang members of the different gangs in the same school, and all whatever would break loose. Well, now it's not just gangs, or it's not very much gangs. It's refugee populations who may come from the same areas, speak different languages, have different cultures and different views, and where violence takes place in their homelands. So I'm hoping that Sergio will share some of that information with us a bit later, because one of the areas that even my church is going to be working with is on the Waverly area, where there is a large refugee population. And we have a committee already established, Sergio, to work with you as we begin to work with them. So thank you, David, for raising that whole issue. I had to look, you moved. I had cataract surgery, so I can't see very well, so I couldn't see which one was David over there. But anyway, we thank you. And we know that music isn't the only art form. And that's why we asked Woon Sik Chong to be here today. He's the senior pastor of North Westminster Presbyterian Church in Lansing. He is an ordained minister of Word and Sacrament, and he holds a Master of Divinity from Union Theological Seminary in Virginia, and a Master of Fine Arts in Painting and Drawing from the Pratt Institute in Brooklyn. He also serves as a liturgical art consultant for various Christian organizations, and is the current director of the Ecumenical Center for Arts and Spirituality. And I had an opportunity to talk with him the other day, and when we talk about the visual arts, we're just so glad that you will be able to come and share with us today.
Peace to you all. Shalom, aloha. We think of these words in a simple way of nonviolence, but really it truly means wholeness. To be whole and well together, not just as an individual, but on the social context as a community. That's what it means to be shalom, 안녕 in Korean, and when we say peace to one another. To me, peace is a place, a sacred space. I believe this is a place where we can speak and share and express about peace with one another without feeling threatened. Why would anybody be threatened by peace? Do you know that we live in a country that is war-driven? We solve problems by fighting. And the language of fighting and shooting at one another is infested in this capitalistic, competitive, watch out for number one society. Growing up, when I was 6, if you were to ask me, what do you want to be when you grow up? I would have said, artist. At that time, I had no idea that I had any artistic talents. But I would say artists, and if you ask me why, I would say because artists are the only ones that I know that is dedicated, fully dedicated to creating beautiful things. So that sounded pretty good to me, and I said, I like to create beautiful things. I had no idea what that meant philosophically. Growing up, I felt at home and at peace in churches and art museums. We go to New York and come to Washington, D.C., Smithsonian's, or go to Detroit, and my family, after like hour and a half to 2 hours, they are done with the art museum. They had to leave me behind because I refused to leave, and they do the tourist thing of shopping and walking and going to other restaurants, and I would spend all day in the art museum alone, and they'll pick me up about 5, 6 o'clock when the museum closes. I don't know why, but I felt safe, peaceful, whole, connected to beautiful things in art museums. I did not feel so, in an intimate way, peace at church. But I felt at home because I knew people. But things happen in churches. They put me on spot. They want me to read scripture. They want me to stand in the front. They want me to sing. But I understood because I knew them and they knew me, and I felt at home. Today, when people ask me, what do you do for a living? I tell them that I am an artist pastor. Then I make them even more perplexed. And I said, I am artist first and pastor second. And this is me as a pastor to my congregation. This is me at Presbyterian meetings and Synod meetings and General Assembly. This is when I'm doing ecclesiastical work. And they ask me, what do you do? And I said, I'm artist first and I'm pastor second. In some way, it is because that's the way it happened chronologically. But in another way, I think I can be more holistic when I am an artist. But certainly, as an artist, I'm in the service to the church. What I discovered is that my passion was not drawing and painting. My passion was not design concepts. My passion was creativity, bringing things that don't seem to belong together and compose it in a way so it harmonizes with one another, that it belongs together permanently, indefinitely, and grow in its intimacy and fruitfulness. One of my favorite stories is about starving artists who hated roses. You know the starving artists? Starving artists, painters. We used to see a lot of advertisements, starving artist sale, and then the whole big, huge painting would be like only $25, $100, and they used to have assembly lines, and they still do that. art fan paintings, those are starving artist painters. When I graduated from art school, I had an offer to work for an art van, and they want me to produce sculptures for like $50. I said, it'll take me a week to create that. And they said, no, you have to produce 5 a day. Okay, why would any starving artist hate roses? During the Depression, a son asked the father, why did you buy that rose when we didn't even have enough money for food? The father would buy a stem of rose, put it in a flower pot, put it on the mantle above the fireplace for the whole family to look at when people, the family, were hungry. The father answered, food is what we need to survive, but the rose is why we survive. You wonder why the son became an artist. He wondered why he became an artist. But later, he realized that we need purpose. You know, people say God is good, but I say God is beautiful. When I read the Bible, especially the book of Genesis, I don't see a myth. I don't see a narrative. I don't see a poetry. I don't see law. I see visual language expressing the wonders and the beauty of cosmos. God did not create this world. God did not bara this world, created out of nothing. God did not asa this world, which is made by hand. The bara and asa is put together to create human beings in the Bible, to show the complexity and the beauty of how the human beings belong to all that is man-created asa and all God-created bara, all comes together in beauty and the composition of all belonging harmoniously. And God said, it is very good after 6 days. In an unethical world, we need to know that God is truth. In an immortal world, we need to be reminded that God is good all the time. In a world full of ugliness, we need to know that God is beauty. God has created our beautiful cosmos. God is recreating beauty within us. God co-creates beauty with us. God empowers us to live, die, and to be reborn to beauty of both seen and unseen. The creative process often involves deconstruction of the old as it constructs what is new. However, unlike destructive violence of hate, which ends in death, creativity always leads the destructive process and recreate and transform into rebirth. Fine art forces us to tell the truth. Do what is good and see the beauty in this world. One day, as I was teaching a drawing class, one of the students raised her hand and said, "Professor, how do I know when I created a masterpiece?" Wow, a profound question that deserves a profound answer. I paused for a moment and I brought attention to the whole class. And I said, if you want to save it forever, you have created a masterpiece. But if it's something you want for a little while, or something is disposable, something you can just sell off or give away, or it's something that you will just lock up in a closet for decades, you don't have a masterpiece. But if you want to share it, have a relationship with it, and preserve it forever, you have a masterpiece. And we are all masterpieces of God, because God wants to save every one of us forever and ever. Like I said, I'm an artist first and a pastor second. Without being able to show my images and present my forms, you got a little bit more of the preaching. Peace to you all.
I think we all like the preaching anyway, don't we? And when you talked about masterpieces and those things that will last forever and those things that will last for a short time or you kind of put away in your closet, I think it might be time for me to have a yard sale because I have a lot of things put away in my garage that have been there and need to be put away. But I appreciate the fact that you were saying that you are an artist first. I've been online, I Googled some of your pieces that are paintings that are online, and they are beautiful and they are peaceful. When you look at them, they depict peace. And I think that tells us something else. That tells us that when we look at ourselves, that if we're talking about connectivity, the most important person to connect with first is yourself. And when you connect with yourself and know who you are, then you're able to connect to someone else. And you made that very clear and appreciated so much your comments. Next, we will have Mohammed Hassan Khalil, who is an associate professor of religious studies and an adjunct professor of law and director of the Muslim Studies program at Michigan State University. Before returning to his hometown of East Lansing, Michigan, he was an assistant professor of religion and visiting professor of law at the University of Illinois. He specializes in Islamic thought and is author of Islam and the Fate of Others, The Salvation Question, and Jihad Radicalism and New Atheism, and editor of Between Heaven and Hell, Islam, Salvation, and the Fate of Others, and he has presented papers at various national and international conferences, and has published peer-reviewed journal articles about books and chapters on various topics, from early Islamic historiography to bioethics. And we're so very happy to have him here. And as he comes before us and gives his presentation, the one thing I want everybody to be thinking about as we listen to all of our presenters is that when we leave here today, this is the first of our conversations, but the conversation should not remain in this room. Everybody should get to know somebody else or somebody's else here and continue the conversation on the phone, text messages, email, or whatever, or together, or come back and have lunch. Sung will invite you to lunch at any time, I'm sure, Dr. Lee. So we thank you for being here, and I appreciate your coming.
Good afternoon. It's a pleasure to be here with you all, and many thanks to the organizers, especially Barbara Mason, and thank you for that generous introduction. And I'm truly honored to meet the other presenters. I must say, like many others, I was deeply moved by Maestro Karim Wasfi's now legendary performance in a context of war and destruction. This was such a profound statement, and more powerful and impactful than most speeches. And so thank you for that. And that, of course, takes place in a Middle Eastern context during a period of war. I'd like to go back in time and think about another era of conflict in the Middle East, in Iraq. In the year 1258 of the Common Era, a Mongol army conquered the great city of Baghdad and then proceeded to conquer much of the then Muslim world. Muslim accounts of the Mongol conquests tend to be very grim, One Muslim historian had no problem discussing the Crusades, but when he got to the Mongol chapter, he said something to the effect that we all know what happened and it's too painful to describe. Other historians offer disturbing details, reports of the killing of thousands upon thousands of innocent civilians and destruction of Baghdad's famous House of Wisdom, a great library and academy. Several decades later, however, the Mongols living in Muslim-majority lands converted to Islam, and in some contexts at least, they went from being a destructive force to some of the greatest patrons of the art. That's one of the things they're known for, is being some of the greatest patrons of the arts. We're here this afternoon to discuss peace building through the arts. Why the arts in particular? Because as we all know, the arts bring out our humanity. One of my favorite images from the medieval world is a painting from Muslim Spain, or Al-Andalus, portraying a Muslim and a Christian playing what appears to be guitars and essentially engaging in a jam session. Their religious differences were irrelevant. Now, I love the arts, but I'm not an artist myself, I have to confess. In 6th grade, I got a D in art. Pretty bad at art. But I love art. And now I'm a professor of religious studies with a focus on Islam and Muslims, but I can certainly appreciate the impact of the arts. And we live in a time when there is much conflict in the world, and there are many who would seek to divide us. I see it overseas and right here. Often what you see is people promoting overgeneralizations and comparing the best of themselves with the worst of others. As a Muslim, I find it sad that some of my fellow Muslims, particularly those overseas, some of them have very negative views of my fellow Americans. And as an American, I find it sad that some of my fellow Americans have very negative views of my religion and my religious community. In my introductory course on Islam, I have to address these negative views without, of course, being apologetic or sugarcoating. And what's interesting is that of all my lectures, it is my lecture on Muslim art and music that tends to have the greatest impact on my students. In that lecture, we view various Muslim devotional music videos. Through these videos, students are able to learn basic facts about Islam while also appreciating the music and the musicians. I present it as a tour of the Muslim world through music videos. I begin my tour not in the Arab world, but in Southeast Asia. At this point in the semester, my students already know that the country with the largest Muslim population is Indonesia in Southeast Asia, right? Followed by, most likely, India, even though it's majority Hindu. Followed by Pakistan, followed by Bangladesh. None of those are Arab countries, of course. And we begin with a music video from Malaysia, actually. And I show them a video featuring a group called Rehan. And the song is called Cinta Hakiki, which means true love. And in this video, they are singing about their love for God, that this is true love. And then I'll show them a video from the Arab world, conveying the same idea. And then I'll show a hip-hop video from right here in the United States, where Muslims are conveying the same point. And then I'll show them other devotional videos from various parts of the world that extend that love of God to love of humanity. For students who may hear about how Muslims don't talk much about love, these kinds of videos challenge them. I also show them multiple music videos where terrorism and wanton violence are strongly condemned on religious grounds. For students who hear about the role of violence in Islam, these videos challenge them as well. I also show them music videos that praise mothers. And this affords me an opportunity to explain to my students why motherhood in particular is a popular theme in devotional Muslim music videos. And why is it a popular theme? Because there are various reports or hadiths in which the Prophet Muhammad is asked by one of his companions, to whom should I be most devoted? And he responds, your mother. And he asks, and then whom? And the Prophet responds, your mother. The man asks, okay, and then whom? And the Prophet responds, your mother. And the man asks, and then whom? And the Prophet says, your father. So father's got a little shafted there. But anyway, but the point is that for students who may hear only negative things about the role of women in Muslim families. These kinds of music videos challenge them to revisit some of their assumptions. And for good measure, I'll be sure to show devotional videos featuring strong, independent women. I also show my students a concert from Bosnia celebrating Ramadan, the month of fasting, which, by the way, is coming up. I'm getting thirsty just thinking about that. So just less than 3 weeks to go. And what's interesting is that this concert from Bosnia looks like a Christmas concert. And so it's very easy for my students then to relate and to see the commonalities. Later in the semester, I usually have a lecture on Muslims of the United States. You notice I didn't say in, I said of. And in that lecture, I make it a point to highlight the role of Muslim artists in the music they listen to already. So I tell them, you know Lupe Fiasco, do you know Mos Def? These are Muslims. And then we might talk about some comedy, and I'll tell them, Dave Chappelle is Muslim. I mean, just to kind of surprise them. And I also tell them that the next time they attend a wedding, and they hear that famous song that we all love, celebrate good times, come on. Remember, I can't sing, but okay, yeah, I'm not good at the arts. But you know the song I'm talking about, yeah. Okay, so who sings that song? Who sings that? Kool and the Gang. Well, guess what? Kool's Muslim. And his brother, Ronald Bell, is Muslim. And he was inspired to write that song after he read a translation of the Quran, which was talking about angels celebrating the praises of their Lord. By the way, if you're doubting this, I was doubting this when I first heard this. Go and look it up. It's pretty amazing. There's a really interesting story there. So when my students learned that this song was not only written by Muslims, but was actually inspired by a passage from the Islamic holy book, that opens their eyes to a world of Islam they probably had no idea about. And of course, my students are also shocked to learn other things. They're shocked to learn that Muslims may have affected other dimensions of their lives. For instance, Muslims introduced coffee to the world. The words algebra and algorithm come from Arabic because some of the greatest mathematicians were Muslim. In Western astronomy, most of the stars have Arabic names. Muslims also contributed in many ways to the field of medicine and the institution of the hospital. And closer to home, it was a Muslim who designed the Sears Tower and the John Hancock Center. Every group has its impressive list of accomplishments, and Muslims are no different. So through education and through the arts, we can challenge problematic perceptions, especially those that attempt to belittle or dehumanize others. And if we can collectively draw attention to the contributions and indeed humanity of all peoples, then we can expose the absurdity of bigotry and division. Thank you for listening.
Thank you so much. When I called and asked, or I think Zendu, is Zendu here? Asked if he would speak today, he, without hesitation, said yes, and we really appreciated it. And one of the things that I liked most about your comments was when you talked about the importance of a mother and how you should cherish your mother and do all things for your mother, because my daughter walked in and my granddaughter, and they know how they must cherish their mother and grandmother. So I appreciate particularly those words. But the other thing is you talked somewhat about misconceptions when it relates to Muslims. My cousin is a Muslim and is a member of the mosque and knows you. As a matter of fact, Adam Al-Ansari. He was raised in Saudi Arabia. But one of the things that his wife has said over and over again is that they were sort of afraid when they moved into the community and began a part of the church there, the mosque there, because they didn't know how they were going to be treated. And then they found that the church next door and the people in the church next door accepted them with open arms. And it's been like a family, a big family community. And they've been so excited and impressed and have felt so good about the kind of relationship that has existed. So that was a wonderful portion or thing to mention, the misconceptions that we have of each other in various faiths, cultural groups, etc. Now we're going to move right on, and I'm going to introduce our next two presenters at the same time, because yesterday when we were together, they had not had an opportunity to meet, and they hadn't had a chance to really talk about what they were going to do. So I just introduced them together, and they one-on-one did it. So I'm going to ask that they do the same thing today, whatever they do. I don't think they've had a chance to talk yet either because we went to the Promise Dinner and left at different times. So I'm very happy that these two people were able to come to be with us today. Kareem Wasfi, and sometimes it's amazing how people get together. Number one, they didn't know each other, but I met Maestro Wasfi at the Sister Cities International Conference last summer, where he presented to the entire group and also to the youth of the conference. One of the youth at the conference was Dominic Waddles, Alvin Waddles' son. And he was so amazed and impressed. I'd never heard Dominic get up and talk in front of a group before, though I guess he does. But he just jumped up and he started asking the maestro questions, and when can I hear you again? So somehow, because of Dominic, his father and the maestro have gotten together. It's amazing, the connectivity, how it takes place. Maestro Wasfi has founded the Center for Creativity, Peace Through the Arts. He has great leadership through music, neuroscience, and cognitive enhancement. He has developed musical performances, cognitive psychology through instant composition performances. He developed and formed 3 youth orchestras in Iraq. He's raised the number of performers there by many, many, many numbers. He's founded new orchestral techniques for advanced students and professional musicians through improvisations. He has established a scholarship through Iraq in Italy, and Italy is one of our new sister cities, Pianezza, Italy. So we're all planning, he doesn't know that, we'd love to go to Italy to visit the children who are receiving your scholarships. You're coming. Well, no, you're paying. So you can join us. You're paying. But he's been known for bridging the cultural gaps by arts and mixing and engaging diverse cultures in the areas through orchestral performances. We're just so happy. He was born in Cairo to an artistic family and began his study of the cello at the Music and Ballet School in Baghdad. He subsequently received his artist diploma there and master's in performance diplomas in cello, electronic music technology, and conducting from the Jacobs School of Music. He served as principal cellist of several ensembles, including the Cairo Symphony Orchestra, and was the conductor of the Iraqi Symphony Orchestra. He's just done so many things that I would take his time if I were to go over them all. So I'm not going to do that. I'm going to let him tell you about himself, his experiences with the war, saving his wife and his children from the rubbles of war. I think that would be better coming from him than from me. He had so much to give to us. And the other person, of course, is Alvin Waddles. Many of you have heard Alvin before. He is a pianist, a singer, composer, director. He began studying piano at the age of 8 in Detroit. He continued his studies at Interlochen Arts Academy and the University of Michigan School of Music, after which he returned to Detroit, where he currently resides. He's been musical director and a pianist for numerous theatrical productions, including The Wiz, The Color Purple, Dreamgirls, Chorus Line, West Side Story, Sophisticated Ladies, and he received rave reviews as a featured performer at the Detroit Music Hall's long-running production of Ain't Misbehaving. He has delighted Detroit music lovers with performances in a variety of musical events. Once again, the list can go on and on. But he can often be seen at the Detroit International Jazz Festival and the Detroit Festival of the Arts, and he's the featured piano soloist in the annual productions of Too Hot to Handle in Detroit and Chicago. And this past weekend, he was invited with Too Hot to Handle to perform in Memphis as a part of the 50th anniversary of the assassination of Martin Luther King. His engagements also as soloist and featured artist have taken him to a variety of destinations, including Barbados, Beijing, Paris, Barcelona, and Ghana. He's also traveled extensively as musical director for Cook, Dixon, and Young, formerly the Three Tenors, and he's been blessed to work with Well, they've been blessed to work with him, some of the world's finest musicians, including Robert Shaw, Margaret Hills, Brazil Denard, Thomas Whitfield, Aretha Franklin, Anita Baker, Placido Domingo, Cheryl Shirley, and many, many, many others. And with that, I'm going to call both of them up to their respective places, Maestro at the cello and Maestro again at the piano. And we welcome you again to be with us and to present in your own fashion, since I have no idea what they're going to do.
This is
We thank you for being here.
As I mentioned very briefly yesterday, I said something in the context of being and creation is resonance becoming visible. And we also convey that through sound and through music in particular. But within that, I just remembered instantly a very quick incident that had happened in West Mosul before actually it was liberated, where myself and this cello was last April, when by a divine intervention or some sort of a miracle, one of the survivors said exactly what I've tried to empower in war zones, helping refugees, performing at cathedrals that were destroyed because of war, helping in mosques, displaced families, orphans, or assisting in assisting them in creating choice. Someone struck me and shocked me. I forgot to discuss this with you actually this morning, and they recognized the instrument and apparently thanked me for the equilibrium that we managed to create and turning arts and culture and civility and refinement into a basic need as much as food and blankets were needed in war zones. This is a family that had walked probably for 4 or 5 days to reach a certain part of the desert where there were some checkpoints. And this is, by the way, this is not a political campaign. This is on Facebook and it's in pictures, and this was a very genuine, authentic personal things. And that young man said, we need this as much as we needed food, oxygen, water, and basic services. I don't think the problem is actually between people. We talk about Israelis and Palestinians and Jews and Muslims and Christians. What are our steps towards the policymakers to change the way things function? And we can talk on and on about this, but I will do it after we play music, not to bore you with words.
Oh, please.
So again, this was nothing is arranged. We connect telepathically. We did this 3 or 4 times now in 48 hours. We did it yesterday, just after 3 days of non-sleep. I flew from Washington to here overnight and then instantly to lunch and then to the performance. But this is inspired by all of you, your energies, our energy, and how we connect and what is the level of interdependence that we can actually experience and refine and develop. I was not supposed to talk before playing, but for some reason, I remember that story that was very shocking and striking. Not to remember yesterday when we met, but there are too many stories. The potential within how we function, if we choose to function at the core of the molecule of who we are as species and what we are, without even finding reason or logic behind it. The rationale is, how can we function at the level of zero, not at the surface of the circle of potential? How much can we actually
You
achieve?
have to talk into the mic.
I need a mic?
Yes.
I do?
Yes.
Anybody in the
Really?
back?
Needs a mic.
I need to amplify my message. Then you have to talk. No,
You have such important
Hello.
things to say.
I hope so. Hello. So this is hello. So actually, it's a psychological impact. Now you can hear me better, although it's not live. So honestly, it's not a good advertisement for the production company of this microphone.
There you go.
Thank you, Mr. Wheeler.
Oh, okay.
It's always you coming up with solutions. I'm not constraining you, but I really mean it. It is very imperative. I'm not sure what was it that you did not hear. I hope you have connected to what Maestro Alvin and myself had conveyed to you, that was also inspired by all of you and connected to your energies. I always said that we are energies and vibrations becoming also manifested in different form. I can talk very long. I hate to, but honestly, at this stage, surviving war zones, surviving 4 assassinations in Baghdad and more than 17 car bombs, performing at more than 19 car bomb sites in a very preventative approach. It wasn't about me. I was telling Baba, thank you for your encouragement, but I don't usually like talking about myself. But it is I am, hence we are. It's all of us, and how in an era of connectivity and interdependence, what are the things that we can actually jointly and share the efforts towards achieving? How much do we want to transcend? How much can we change? And the major factor as a belief, with full faith that I can share with all of you, is peace being a profitable model. War does not need to be the only way corporates make money, corporations survive. We can sell weapons, we can buy weapons. Maybe actually beyond tabula rasa in every one of us, the clean slate of function and how our brains function. Maybe there's an ISIS fighter in every one of us. Maybe, possibly. We don't, genetically, possibly. We have DNAs, we have chromosomes, we have similar structure as species. But we have the individuality of every one of us that should function. Terrorists, this is not a new game, it's not a new story, it's a business model. And I'm not for conspiracy theories. I was just discussing 9/11 with someone at the airport and how of a pain traveling became. But actually that created lots of business opportunities around many airports. It's not it's not the reason behind it. This is one of the outcomes of this. The point I'm making is, we know people connect. Again, we know Sunnis and Shia and the all 74 different Muslim faiths or beliefs, or the different Jewish beliefs, or the many Christian beliefs, and then beyond Abrahamic religions, the 3 of them, into other beliefs and other religions. What is this all about? I mean, you look at a rabbi and a sheikh and a minister. Many of them have beards and hair, and they say similar things and they share similar things. What is it about? Honestly, it's not limited to people. Politics and monopoly, intimidation and self-interest, which is how we function, can be shifted and changed through proactive
preventative paths and roadmaps. Music in particular, I'm proud of what you have mentioned, creating orchestras in Iraq. I had militia fighters who gave up their Kalashnikovs or other weapons and became members of orchestras, actually, smaller orchestras performing in different parts of Iraq. 45 of my students made it to the National Symphony Orchestra, and they are paid salaries. The orchestra actually salary was, I managed to raise it 500%. The number turned from 49 musicians into 130, and there are 27 peace to arts centers around Iraq now instead of one. But that's not the issue. Israelis and Arabs will always connect. They will eat falafel at the end of the night and they will be fine. Iranians and Iraqis in a war zone, they were fighting during the day, and they would defy some orders and start playing dominoes and exchange chai and kebab overnight. And the war ended and everybody was hugging and crying. I think it's beyond that. I'm a very optimistic, and I believe in the driving force behind change, but it's not really the core of the problem. It's not about how people are not connecting or disconnecting. Everybody is connecting, including terrorists. And some of them look normal, they act normal, they have bank accounts, and terror is not a new game. Communication is much faster, technology is much faster. How are you utilizing artificial intelligence? What are the things that, who are morally and ethically writing the context for artificial intelligence and robots to function for our near future? Who ethically has that? Corporations? Yes. Are you enslaved by materialism? Yes. Yes, we are. The point is how to empower dignity, self-realization, even beyond Maslow's pyramid, self-conceptualization and respect, mutual respect, integration. Our public, I just got a prize that, before getting here, I was in Abu Dhabi and I got the Global Cultural Ambassador. What does that mean? It means that cultural diplomacy is mutual. Integration is essential, even if we don't tolerate each other, even if we disagree. The idea is what works fast, and some are investing in fast solutions and utilizing killing and weapons and all that. We know, we have identified the problems for a long period, for long times, beyond synagogues and mosques and shrines and churches and cathedrals and all that. We have been through the same 6 centuries ago, or in Islam longer, or even in Judaism longer than that. Actually, prior to Abraham, where I actually conducted the Iraqi National Symphony, right there, it's at the ziggurat. The point is, how can we create a refined, cultivated roadmap, utilizing what we have in hand, not the wishes for things that we cannot achieve. Peace through arts is a model that works. The ability to change, the ability to empower self-realization, a higher level of consciousness and awareness, to actually enable a person not to be intimidated by a terrorist, not to be intimidated by a car bomb. That was the only reason I performed at these bomb sites, to defy terror and intimidation. And every one of us has this inside of them. Do politicians have that inside of them? Maybe yes, maybe no. But what to do? Knowledge, education, empowering mutual understanding and integration, and these models work. And prioritizing at the zero, again, at the level, at the core of the issue, not at the syntax, not at the curve of the circle of the problem. We have to tackle the core of the issue. Peace is a profitable model. It's not a shy example of how we live and how we should be living. It's empowering choice and to help people make choices. And if someone has a choice to blow themselves up, they can go and do it at the desert without killing others who disagree with them. But we help them not to do that. I can say much more, but I thought I would choose a very simple language to convey what I was trying to convey, less complex than the music we have performed. You're not going to talk. I
It would be
commend you
nice-
for able. I really didn't want to talk. I
It would be
do.
nice if you were to play something for us by yourself
Now you have to pay.
and then have them.
Okay.
That works well, I know.
So, no talking.
By yourself.
Wonderful, wonderful. Part of connectivity is visualization. And as you were playing, Maestro Wasfi, I could just envision you on the bomb sites playing as the people were listening and thinking about the fact that maybe peace will come one day, and you would be such a major, major part of that. And we thank you so much. You and Alvin, one of the things that you might not have heard is that Alvin and Maestro Wasfi were connecting as they were improvising music together, that you have to listen, and that we all have to listen, whatever we're doing, but you have to listen to be able to connect and be able to play in that fashion, especially never having played before, and that's a part of improvisation. So Alvin, I'm going to ask you if you will now talk about universal language of music. He always does that.
very much cared for talking. I was not a very gregarious, outgoing person growing up. It probably did not help that my mother was a teacher. So whenever we spoke, she corrected you all. God bless. Now I'm old, and I was talking to her earlier, and she said that you're slurring. So I was still a bit apprehensive about speaking. But what I found through music was an ability to communicate, to speak to people, to reach people, to help people understand what I feel without the barrier of words, without the difference of dialects and ethnicities and even dialectics, without the boundaries and the things that separate us, without even opinions, because all of you heard that, and I'm sure you all thought of something entirely different. But at least for one moment, we all heard the same thing. And we heard it in its purest form. I said it from my heart. And Beethoven, he inscribed on his great piece, one of his last great works, the Missa Solemnis, it says it comes from the heart in the hopes that it goes directly to the heart. This is from a man who can't hear anything. And yet but such glorious music which endures and still inspires. This is peace. This is sharing. This is communication. This is the gift. This is what we all possess. Not necessarily the ability to see everything the same way. That's not peace. It's not even realistic. It's not what we were created to do. But we were created to listen, to actually hear one another. My esteemed colleague, it's been such a delight. I haven't had a chance. We've spent so little time together over the course of this. We literally go from one venue to another and we meet each other there. We haven't spoken otherwise. We haven't even shared a piece of bread. Did they feed you?
No.
Yes,
Yes,
Of course they did.
It's a low budget production, I tell you. But and so you come together, and but I've got a chance to listen to him, and more importantly, I've got a chance to feel him. His language is not necessarily mine. His musical language is not mine at all. But I got a chance to listen to him play. But while playing with him, the challenge becomes very real. It becomes, hopefully we illustrated that it's a matter of listening. It's hearing what is he trying to say? How is he trying to say it? How can I fold myself into what he's trying to say, and vice versa? We trade, we make statements. He hears me, I hear him. And together we create a world that has beauty and meaning and purpose. And it's honest because it comes from me and it comes from him. And it's an honest combination without bending, without breaking, without fighting. Without me trying to push him into some direction or him pull me in another direction because I think that mine is so much more valid. They both have validity. And they both deserve to be heard. The person sitting next to you, the people you don't know in this room, they deserve to be heard by you and understood and appreciated. This is art. This is peace. This is God. Go ye now in peace.
Thank you so much to both of you and to all of our panelists. It's just been marvelous because one of the things that we want to continue to say, not just today and not just yesterday or tomorrow, but we have to listen. And that was a classic example of how we connect by listening and understanding what other people have to say. And that's what we want to do right now. We want to hear from you. we want to know about the refugee children, if Sergio is still around. And I know Dave Wiley is here, and he's been around for so many years. He was over African Studies at Michigan State for so many years, and with GLUNA, Greater Lansing United Nations Association. And I know that there's so many people who would have either questions or comments to make. So I'm going to open the door to you to make a statement. Tell us what you think about peace, how we can come together more, how we can begin to understand each other more and listen to each other more. Is there someone who would like to begin this conversation? Oh, okay.
Yes.
This is Bella.
Thank you, Bella. Good afternoon, everyone.
Good afternoon.
I'm Mark Auslander. I'm the relatively new director of the MSU Museum and have spent my career working on issues of coexistence and through the arts, and so it's an honor to hear everything. It occurred to me, and this is very speculative, that the piece of music that we heard collaboratively now began to answer the question posed by all the panelists, which was how is it that serious virtuosic art can in fact transform consciousness and create that shared sacred space of, at least of coexistence and the possibility of transformed consciousness that allows us, that gives us the antidote to the very proclivities for violence within us. And it seemed to me the piece, and this perhaps is just an idiosyncratic interpretation, that it so profoundly reminded me of the unfolding of the 137th Psalm by the rivers of Babylon when we gather and weep. And precisely because the captors, if you recall, the captives are asked by their captors to sing songs of joy from Zion, which is the most terrible, excruciating pain, and yet is suffused with the pleasure of the memory of Jerusalem, of the lost homeland, calls forth every possible violent emotion in the singer, right? Who even dreams of smashing the brains of the babies. I mean, what makes serious art, and that's what seemed to me that when we began with the first moments of understanding, I sort of had that vision of by the rivers of Babylon, of the water, moving back and forth in time, and the listening that was going on, the exchange, the reciprocity, was of enormous pain out of which emerged, it seemed to me in the middle of the trudging march, which could be both of the captives going from Zion to Babylon. I mean, it's fanciful, but that's that sense, but also of the imagination of the tread of an army, and that nothing human, no emotions seemed to be excluded. Every possibility was there, which is that profound honesty of art, and yet returning us somehow to a similar place, the trickle of the water, where everything was the same and somehow everything was different. And it seems to me that that is part of the work of collaborative art, that it can take us through this valley of pain and suffering together and rebuild a community right in front of us that gives us that possibility of hope at a time where hope seems impossible. So I just wanted to share that thought.
Thank you.
If I may say something in follow-up to the water of Babylon, is that peace takes time. It takes generations. The peace talk that is happening in Korea right now between North and South Korean leaders, 70 years have passed. 3 generations has passed. By the water of Babylon, South Koreans from North Korea mostly have faded away. They remember their home in Pyongyang and other provinces they have never seen since they left. But what is true about the Babylon in the Psalm is that those who wrote the Psalm is the 3rd generation diaspora Jewish community. It's not the first generation who suffered, who had to risk everything to survive. It was not the 2nd generation that kind of settled down and they were beginning to make it for themselves. It was the third generation that had enough courage, energy, resource, and establishment to be in the society as an influenced member of the society, who became poets, writers, philosophers, and sang the songs of their grandfather, which they heard from their dad and mom. And now they have articulated into artistic form. It took 3 generations. So I'm not surprised that in Korea right now, it is the 3rd generation that must make beauty out of what has been a chaos and violence and destruction. It takes time. Peace is not easy. It is not fast. It is not instant. It's not immediate. But despite the violence and the shortcomings and the suffering, the peace does get established. God is with us, and despite the violence, despite war and conflict, peace will thrive.
That is so true. And what, if I can just interject, as you're talking about what may be occurring in South and North Korea, and let's pray that it does come to fruition. The first time that I went to Korea and I was outside of Seoul, many of you or some of you may know Tai Kim, who was at LCC. And as we crossed a river, all of us were crossing the river, and he'd been back home so many times, but the tears were coming out of his eyes, and he began to tell us about the story of the war, and how he was there when his grandfather and his uncle and his family members were swimming from one shore to the other, and how some of them made it, and others never made it. And after the war, well, the war hasn't ended yet, as they're trying to end the war now, some of his relatives he never heard from again. So that's a poignant story, and it's something that we need to keep in mind, the impact of war. It's just not going on the battlefield, but the whole impact of war. And as you're talking about the rivers of Babylon, every time we go to Ghana, and we're going back in October if anybody wants to go, we go to what's called Slave River. And that's where the slaves took their last bath. And we pray. We have a religious service there because their next step was the slave dungeons, where they waited for the boats to come to carry them away. And we sing by the rivers of Babylon every time we go in our service. Ruby? Can- Just a minute, I'm sorry. Pamela, feel free to.
I was invited by Barbara and Maxine, and I want to thank you for that, because hearing these personal experiences makes it really come home, and this has been so enlightening and good. And I think, I apologize, I didn't Google about sister cities before I came, and I talked to others, and they said this is their first time. My question is, could you tell us how sister cities connects, how often you meet, and the mission? Is the mission peace through the arts?
No, Sister Cities is an international organization, and we are one component of it. There is a state organization as well as the local. We have 7 sister cities, and they're in Japan, Korea, Italy, Ghana, where else? Mexico, and I'm missing some, China. We have 2 sister cities in China. And our mission is different in each of our sister cities. The primary mission is to join people together from around the world to create a better understanding among people, so that we may not speak the same language, but we can communicate. And that we want to train our children, because there is a youth summit at each of the sister cities' international conferences. We want to train our children to be a new generation of leaders, so that when they leave that conference, they have learned to put together the ability to talk together, listen together, and be able to come to consensus on ideas. They may not agree, but at least they can come to consensus. We have different programs in Ghana because the needs are different than we have in China. Some of our programs are humanitarian, some are economic development, some are more cultural. But we meet once every 2 months, And there are 25 members on the commission. It's a nonprofit, and we work directly with the city of Lansing. Yes. And it was started after the war by Dwight Eisenhower, as a matter of fact. Yes.
Also, since we're referring to Sister Cities International, I would like to thank you so much for this invite and opportunity. I'm also the country rep for Iraq, representative actually for Iraq and Egypt for Sister Cities International. There are many teams that are operating, many cities that are already connected, but I was aiming to do much more and also connect Mosul and Nineveh, the whole Christian valley over there, and also in reference to some of the Jewish history of those areas, and then the Islamic areas around that area, to be connected in a different way or form to the whole outside world. I just thought that would affect this.
Yeah, thank you. Dave Wiley.
Thank you, Barbara, and all the Sister Cities people for creating this peaceful afternoon for us, filled with beauty as well. And I was just struck by the contrast of our situation this afternoon as consumers of this wonderful expression of the arts and of peace, with those young Syrian young people and Iraqis and Yemenis and Ghanaians and Malians and Nigerians who had to run away from their music lessons, perhaps even following their music teachers to escape the terrible turbulence of their societies filled with destruction and bombs and the like. So we were so fortunate. So my question was asking myself, well, what can we be doing in order to respond to this as consumers of this wonderful culture? And I think that our contribution is to follow in the steps of Barbara and those of the sister city who are trying to build connections and to build support for the exchange of culture and the arts. And we have a very, very particular target right now to do that, because we have just seen the FY19 budget that President Trump and the Republicans have released, which, unlike the budget this last year, where a lot of good things like National Endowment for Humanities, which supports the arts, and Title VI and Fulbright Hays and the like were supported by the Congress, the FY19 budget will wipe out all of that, will end all support of public broadcasting, perhaps the biggest purveyor of the arts and culture in our society. Will eliminate the Fulbright programs, and which take Michigan State students abroad to serve and build partnerships in these and the like. And will wipe out the capacity of the United Nations to do a lot of peacekeeping work to create the context in which music and culture and the arts can grow. Very specifically, we had just wiped out all U.S. contributions to the World Population Program, which saves probably 40,000 African women's lives a year in East Africa alone. We have cut by about 25% our contribution to the United Nations peacekeeping, where for the cost of one American soldier abroad, 8 African peacekeepers can go abroad to the sites of, and Nepalese and Indians and others can go to preserve the peace, to create the context in which the arts and culture can grow. And strangely enough, you know, this is not an unpopular cause. We've just seen a new survey that shows that most Americans support staying with the United Nations and its programs. 80% of voters say stick with the United Nations, including, by the way, 75% of Trump voters say we should stick with the United Nations and its peacekeeping programs. But nevertheless, the problem is that our politicians are voting to, quote, bring the bacon home for defense programs such as the proposed new missile base at Fort Custer in Battle Creek and the like, rather than to support UN and its provision of peace to create a culture in which the arts can grow. So I just want to say with Senator Debbie Stabenow on the Budget Committee of the Senate, and Senator Gary Peters on the Armed Services Committee of the Senate. Now is the moment for those of us who love peace and the arts to step forward to tell them what we expect of them to do their part in boldly, not just as joining in, boldly the defense of the United Nations and its peacekeeping forces that can help to support peace and the arts that we all have seen this afternoon as a wonderful, peaceful context. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I will also mention that Sister Cities does a lot in terms of youth exchanges. We have Korean exchanges, Japanese exchanges. We want kids to go to Ghana with us and China. So we've been responsible for a lot of programs such as those. There was a, right there.
Hello.
Hello.
I thank the sister cities for this unique and inspiring session. I have thoroughly enjoyed every bit of it, and I thank my friend Maxine for encouraging me to come.
Well, thank you.
Peace is not necessarily the absence of war, and peace without hope or patience is dead. As you work, please try to encourage the young people. Bring them up along. Get them to go with you. For each one older person, get 2 or 3 younger folks, because they are the ones who will take up the mantle. I'm from war-torn countries in Africa. I've seen a whole lot of that. I have seen young babies on the backs of dead mothers who have been shot. I have seen friends who have gone to volunteer to take care of the wounded, and they caught between the crossfire of which rebel group to take care of first, and because they made the wrong decision or the right decision, they were killed. I have a very good friend that I will never forget. The war was so serious in Liberia. She and her 2 children were caught in the bush somewhere with no food. They ate poisonous plants and they died. I've had some family members who have died just because of hunger. And lots of times, these wars, the root of them is power. People want to show off. You know, I can do this, I can do that. But I'm telling you, it doesn't take much to bring about peace. I listened to the music. You heard the 2 gentlemen. They didn't know each other before, but they compromised. They gave and they took. So please continue. This is a worthy cause. You might not know how much it is, but I sat down here and I've enjoyed every single minute. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. Sister Cities has had a lot of activities over its past 25 years, but we have not had conversations such as this in the past, and we wanted to try it and see if people would be really interested in joining together to talk about the issues such as those that you are discussing that took place in Liberia and those in Fallujah, and where you saved your wife and your children. I don't know if you want to say any more about that, because to me, when I heard that, I just wanted to cry.
Actually, that was a very unique story. When someone tells me I'm Americanized now, and I can do whatever I want, which is very true. What is it that we can do? How do we identify authority, and how do we identify the power of self and the power of what we can do while we're facing this can become a very critical, confusing situation with the international law. And then what if you have someone who's elected? What if you have implementation of policies for people that were elected legally by populace in a very democratic approach? And I would not bring examples here, but the possibilities of things not necessarily going to your suffice and not necessarily pleasant. You mentioned you reminded me with Fallujah. There is a very confused perspective, and sometimes perception is not necessarily the reality. Perception is a different concept, and about music and Islam in general, which is unfortunately very vague for people who do not know, but at the same time, the concept of how music and how sound is considered, and this is not radical Islam as the conversation we had earlier, but this is in general, what is the concept of and it was known that music was forbidden inside a mosque, and I think it was for the holiness and the way that knowing that classical music for that genre had more to do with Christianity than Islam, but music was already it's even Babylonian. It's 5,000 years earlier than the current days, and it's way beyond before that. Religion had contained music in a way. These 52 kids were not exposed to anything but dead bodies in the streets of Fallujah, and they didn't know who was who. And I don't want to be very graphic now, but these are realities. And the noise of bombings and bombs and rockets and bullets and all that, I have experienced that in 1980 through 88. 8 years of war. I've heard more sirens at some point than Mahler, and more rockets than Beethoven or Brahms. And it was very, very ironic and even surreal at some point, until we managed to create another level of balance. The impact, and this is on video again, it's even on Facebook actually. I felt a bit shy putting that on social media, but I thought I would share it 2 years ago when I did it. They have expressed change within seconds. I simply could not go inside the mosque. I stood at the gate, started playing Bach in G major, very pleasant scale, positive energy, then started improvising so they feel more genuine, and I explained to them the difference between instant composition and something that Bach had composed, and he was a capelle master in some cathedral. I couldn't give them so many information because they were confused. They see dead bodies and then someone playing the cello, or they hear noise of rockets and bombs and then they hear music. How harmonious can life be, and why? Why should life be even harmonious? Why do we need peace? A kid asked me, why do we need to listen to you? And I told him, exactly this is what we need to hear. Not to justify, but why do we need peace? How can we reach a level of identifying reason and rationale behind connectivity and tolerance and integration? Everybody I've asked, and this was a very personal approach, I've asked every one of them. I gave them, I got my notebook and scratched papers, and we gave them pencils, and I said, please draw something or say something. These kids, they were between the age of 5 and 11. And I have to share with you, and I'm not being very racist or very narrow-minded, some of the adults over there didn't think it was relevant for them to hear cello of some guy coming and playing, and he was the maestro of it, so who cares? You have a 300 years old instrument there. We just survived death. And I wouldn't say it's justified. I understood their point of view when he told me, teach them something important for the future. When the kid answered him, who wanted to be an astronaut, said, this is going to make me reach the moon. I didn't answer the old man, who was very, very hardcore. I wouldn't continue. But in front of the mosque, we were staying there, and the kid said, the sound of what I heard is going to be my way to reach the moon one day. And people who were around there started actually crying. I mean, I have this on video. And it was all taken by phones. It was a very genuine personal approach. So these kids, someone wanted to be an officer to defy radicals, someone wanted to be an engineer, some few wanted to be musicians, someone wanted to be an astronaut, inspired by a cello that was made in Italy. And many girls were there sitting next to boys. Some of these families, there were 5 families living in one chamber, 2 by 3. It's worse than a jail in a third world country. And all what they have shared was inspiration and hope. But the main achievement was how proactively they can act towards the future and defy intimidation and the monopoly of intimidation, whether it's religious, economical, societal, and that is through knowledge, self-respect, self-realization, and deep listening that everybody needs. If we limit our options to politics and politicians, we are reaching nowhere, and we will keep crying at the rivers of Babylon, whether it's because of Nebuchadnezzar or because of the enslavement, or whether it's because of the space between inevitability and probability. It's everybody's wake-up call, and I say it again, terror has a functioning network. It's for altruism to have a better functioning network. If we keep living in silos and behind T-walls, we are way, way, way so late to achieve anything. We have to create proactively, not an equilibrium. We have to overcome the impact of intimidation and radicalization, whether it's through resources on the personal level, through our religious affiliations, through our personal affiliations, sharing the message of hope, but also proactively working towards knowledge and the power of knowledge and the power of transcendence.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. I think this has been a wonderful opportunity for us to hear from each other. And I want the conversation to continue, but I do want you to know that we have snacks over there for you if you would like. But as we partake in those snacks, I want you to continue to talk with each other. And I want you to come back around and let's communicate together and identify somebody whom you don't know, whom you might want to talk with after today is over. And Maxine is going to come up and sort of end this portion with us, and then Alvin is going to play a couple more pieces for us as we enjoy our meal, our snacks. And remember, we're talking a lot about international peace, but we need to think about peace right in our homes, in our schools, in our churches, in our neighborhoods. It starts at home. Maxine. Oh, I'm sorry.
I'm on.
Oh, yes.
Barbara, I appreciate your leadership so much. I'm an educator, and as we were wonderfully at peace this afternoon together, I kept reflecting on our classrooms. You all know that across this country, teachers are on strike. Our schools are more segregated than ever. Our divisions within schools seem to be profitable to the wrong people. The teachers and the children are not at peace. And we have let the corporate political world take over our school system. We used to have things called arts enhancers in our building that met with teachers and helped them create their curriculum to be thematic and integrated and find other ways of expression and communication. And we had school-wide themes. We had librarians in the school libraries, and now some of the schools I work with in literacy, those kids only get to go to the library 5 times a year. We've taken the arts out of the school. We've put STEM education in science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. We've taken out humanities, civics, truly literature. We used to teach with lovely quality pieces of literature. It's been replaced with canned teacher-proof lessons, and the kids never get a full piece of literature. If we want people to be, these children aren't learning how to be advocates of peace, or even learning peace in themselves, or how to communicate, because they're being forced towards taking standardized tests and being evaluated on corporate data. And so this embracing in the world and listening in a greater part has to happen, but we have to at home teach our kids how to live with each other and express themselves and be engaged as well. So this afternoon with all of you, the piece was wonderful, but I kept thinking about our poor little kids right here in our community who aren't at peace today.
Yeah, that is so true. And we have to continue to encourage our schools to incorporate the arts in the curriculum, to put the arts back in, encourage them to do that. And before Maxine, those of you who really want to help us to put together small conversations, because that's what we really want to begin to do, 20 people, 25 people, 15 people, Tori is at the registration desk, and just sign your name on a sheet with your email address and your phone number. We probably have those anyway. And let us know that you want to participate in a conversation. Maybe two of us. I'll sit down with you. You sit down with me, and we'll just talk. Okay? Maxine.
Good afternoon. How many of you have ever heard that all Jews are just alike? All blacks are just alike. All Hispanics are just alike. All Arabs are just alike. All boys are just alike. All girls are just alike. But are they really? What do we have to do to change that perception? Well, as a teacher, we are going to do an experiment. And I need like 9 volunteers. Not 2, but 9. Come on up. Come on up. I want the panel to come on up. Each of you, come on up. Come on. And I want, okay, come on up. I need 9 volunteers. Okay?
Thank you.
You need one, I'll go get it. Okay. Okay, now, what they have to do, see, I believe in active participation as a teacher, okay? What you have to do to prove that all Asians and Jews and African Americans and Hispanics and others aren't alike, what we have to do is prove it. You have to get to know this orange here. This is called the orange experiment. You have to give this orange a personality, a name, an age, a career, a hobby, dreams and visions. And you have to introduce your personality to those in the audience. And as an educator, what do I have to do first? I have to what? I have to model. Right, I have to model and actually do that. My friend's name is Jabari. Jabari went to Cumberland and Otto and Sexton here in Lansing, Michigan. He's now Dr. Jabari Kane. He teaches in Atlanta, and he has 5 children, 4 boys and 1 girl, and a wife named Sylvia. They love their children, and they are so busy. I heard Sylvia say one day, I'm so tired, and I wonder why. This is my friend, Dr. Jabari Kane. Give him a hand, please. And speak to me. Where's that mic? Where's that mic?
Oh, here's one.
Okay. Speak to her. Who is your friend?
My friend is my son, Robert Hicks. Lives in Atlanta. His occupation is transferring people to their dialysis or other appointments, and I'm very proud of him. He is married to Tori. She is a third grade teacher, and we have a blended, I have blended family of grandchildren.
Okay, thank you. What's the name again?
Robert Hicks.
Give him a hand. Okay, Pastor Mike, hurry along here.
Okay, greetings. Well, my subject's name is Elena. She is, I would say, late 50s, early 60s. She has some blemishes already in her skin. She's absolutely beautiful. There's discoloration, as oftentimes we get as we age. And there's beautiful scars from bearing 3 children who have given her 6 grandchildren. It is an accomplished individual, has a lot of scars and dents to show life, the path that life has taken her.
Very good.
And she's absolutely beautiful. Has beautiful rosy cheeks still, and she's just marvelous.
Okay, thank you. Give her a hand. Get to know your friend. Get to know your friend.
Hello. I actually have 2 children, so I cannot distinguish between which one would be my orange because they're both my dear loves. However, I have a very special young woman, and this will be my orange. Her name is Aisha, and she is a young girl, the age of 20. She lives in Kampala, Uganda. Aisha is a young child, lost her parents both to AIDS, has grown up in her life in a wonderful, wonderful Ugandan refugee area where she has learned how to develop into a beautiful young woman. She now, with the help of many of us, is in her 2nd year at the University of Kampala. She is learning to go into the technical computerized field. A beautiful young woman who is making a difference through her education, through her love of music. She is involved in singing, in instrumental, and in all forms of music. So a wonderful young woman, and her name is Aisha.
All right, give her a hand, Meg.
This is Emmanuel.
Okay.
He's a prophet. He's a teacher. He's about 30 years old. And he's about to lay down his life for this presenter.
All right. Okay.
I want to eat mine too.
God with us.
Wait, Maestro, we do that orange before you eat it.
This is Angelina. Angelina is 8 years old. Angelina is an orphan. She lost her mother when she was 8. She lost her father when she was 5. But Angelina was taken in by her Aunt Lauren and her cousin Bella, and she's living a wonderful, peaceful life and coming of age because she has people around her who love her, and she feels that love, and she's peaceful within because she has so much love surrounding her. So this is Angelina, and she's going to grow up to go to college. She wants to be an engineer, and we're just going to wait and see what happens. And the other thing, she's been adopted by her church family, and she loves her church. Angelina.
This is Susan. Susan is a woman in her early 50s. She's overcome chronic illness and has found equilibrium. She works for the National Institute of Health Foundation, which runs international research programs, medical research programs, around the world to find cures, particularly in, quote, third world countries, developing countries. Right now, the project that she's working on is overcoming tuberculosis and looking for new ways to find cures for tuberculosis. And the projects are in China and in South Africa. As I hold her, she is on her way to South Africa to meet with the researchers from around the world to look at the status of their project.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, Susan.
This is Mr. O. Mr. O is a liquor store owner, but he is famously known in town for closing on the Christmas Eve, one of the most profitable day of the liquor store. So he and his family can attend Christmas Eve worship service together.
All right.
But his daughter in college was just diagnosed with cancer. He had to shut down the liquor store and go out of town to the hospital where she'll be treated for months. And it will ruin him because he will have no profit. He has no insurance. But fortunately, the daughter is being treated, and after a year, he had gained more blemishes, bruises, inside and out. Yet, God was good to him. She recovered, the whole community prayed, and he came back and went to the following year Christmas Eve worship service.
This is my friend Hadi. We went to high school together, and he, after graduating, got married, had kids, found a job overseas, has 3 kids now. He lives in Dubai, I think, and but he's going to move back, and he actually is here right now because his father's on his deathbed, dying of cancer at Sparrow Hospital. So he's visiting his father now.
Nice to meet your friend.
And last but not least,
Yes.
and this is a true story also, this is my friend, Carnation, a real name. Carnation is someone I went to high school with, so I've known her for a long time. If you see Carnation, you will see that one side is very shiny and bright and happy. The other side is sad because she is very ill right now in the hospital with cancer. She's been there since October, and so I am hoping that with all of the good wishes and prayers that we are sending through Caring Bridge, an online application, that eventually and quite soon she will get better and better and look like this.
Nice.
Thank you.
Now, take one more look at your friend. Put your friends right here, please. Maestro Alvin, this is for you. You put your friend on this napkin right
He's eating his.
He's naked.
Turn around, please. Turn around. Turn around. Come back, and I want you to now come and get your friend, and the one on this table should be Dr. Jabari Paul Kane. Get your friend only. And we all know Alf, we all know. Make sure it's your friend. I want to see Dr. Jabari Paul Kane on that table. You have your friends?
I have my friend.
You have your friends? That's your friend. This has never happened before.
We're special.
You're special. That's your friend. That's your friend.
We know
That's
this is
your
his.
friend.
Okay, Maxine, there you go.
Mama, you feel Jabari?
Okay. This is Jabari. But how did you know which one was your person. What did you do?
I studied it. It's when I talked about the blemishes and the scars, and that's exactly I was going on what Elena had on her.
What did you do to get to know that person? You spent what with that person?
Time.
You spent time with that person. You had a conversation with that person. You got to know that person. And as people of peace, what do we have to do to get to know each other? We have to spend time with each other. We have to talk to each other. Get in your space. Get to know who you are. And that's how we create peace around the world, getting to know people one orange at a time. Now, if we want to have peace in the world, it has to begin with us. So I have some gifts to give you as you listen. The first gift is this. Please listen. E plus R equals O. Say that. E plus R equals O. The events in my life plus my response equals the outcome. So your husband can't make you mad. Your wives can't make you mad. Your children, good listeners, can't make you mad. You choose to make yourself angry. I like the way you're listening. That's the teacher in me. E plus R equals O. Also, own your response to other people's emotions. Just because someone else goes out there acting a fool does not mean you go out there with you. Own your response to other people's emotions. Like Michelle Obama said, when they go low, you go high. Don't be anyone's puppet. What is this? Toilet. You know what? My mother told me that nobody is any better than I am, nor any less. That I'm comfortable walking with Barack Obama, Michelle, but also just as comfortable walking with that homeless person named John on the corner of Waverly and Saginaw. That no one is any better than I am or any less. Besides, everyone what? Needs what? Find me a person that does not need some Charmin, and I will say that that person might be better, but everybody needs some Charmin. My last gift to you is, remember this Charmin. Take you a little piece like this, fold it up, put it in your wallet, and take it with you for the rest of your life. My last present is a camcorder. It's a video camera, just like Paul has. I'm giving everyone one of those cameras right there. Okay? Hold it up, place it right here, close to your heart. And every day, the Lansing Regional Sister Cities Commissioners want you to record everything you say and everything that you do for the rest of your life. This is your daily video. And instead of watching, I don't know who comes on TV, the shopping people and all those people, instead of watching them, every day the commissioners want you to listen to what you said that day. Look at what you did that day. And if it's something wrong, we want you to do what? Delete it. If it's good, what do? You save it. Those are your gifts from Commissioners with Peace. Love. Thank you.
On that note, we will adjourn, and Alvin's going to play a couple pieces on the piano while we go to the table over there and get some refreshments. And since they're all paid for, you have to eat them. Thank you, everybody, for coming. Thank you so much. And remember, the conversations shall continue.